Welcome back, you all, to CHD 220. And this week we're going to be discussing Chapter 4, Becoming a Competent Parent. So here are just some key terms that you might want to go over as you go through the chapter. So let's talk about the family relationship in parenting. A lot of times, of course, the family is the foundation upon which children build their own lives. But a lot of times I think parents believe that once they have children, that parent-child relationship becomes the primary relationship in their family. So, and that's really a false statement, because if the spouse or the mom and the dad or the parents per se don't keep each other and their relationship at the forefront, then the actual family dynamic will suffer. So that's such a really important thing. And we talked about that in a chapter earlier, that we need to make sure that we keep that parent relationship as the forefront relationship. And then that serves as a great foundation for children to build their own lives on. So let's talk about, I'm going to kind of skip through the PowerPoint because I'm not going to discuss every single slide, and you can go back in and read your chapter and the supplemental resources, as well as read the PowerPoint yourself. Okay, so I'm not going to read it for you. This is one of those things that we were talking about with how marriage affects children, and that a couple that loves each other and shows that affection helps children ultimately too, because it helps them become secure. So that goes back to that primary relationship not necessarily always being or never being just the parent and the child, but more about the couple themselves. So strong families turn out to be strong parents, okay, because strong families support and appreciate one another. And what you'll see three ways in which they do that. They recognize each member's needs and their goals. They acknowledge each person's contribution to the family, and they respect and trust one another. So those are three ways that families support and appreciate each member. And they also can do that by spending time together. Especially in families where we really will see some positive communication, and that really is key, is when you're talking about strong families, it's communicating. So let's talk about strong families or effective parents. They understand child growth and development processes. They understand those four areas of development: the physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. And we know that physical development applies primarily to growth. Okay, the growth of the child. Intellectual, of course, is our cognitive, that's our thinking, our intelligence, our language comes from there. Emotional development is how we control our own feelings. Okay, it's recognizing and controlling our own emotions. And then, of course, social development is relating and interacting with others. So most babies, we know, are going to follow that orderly sequence of development. It's called maturation. And, you know, that's one of those things where parents really have to, if they didn't have younger siblings or didn't grow up in a family with younger children, they may not necessarily understand that growth and development principles. But there's lots of ways in which we can get ourselves informed about that. Through our pediatricians and doctors, by looking on the internet. But we know that you know, it's good when parents know those kinds of things so that they can follow that process with their children. So we're going to talk about heredity and environment on a child's development. We know that hereditary traits in combination with the environment forms the total person. Okay, so we know a lot of times there's an argument of heredity versus environment, and really it's a little bit of both. It's about heredity, but also that environment from which they come from. We've discussed in some other classes about temperament. And of course, temperament is the way children filter their environment. Okay. If there's a whole lot of outside stimulation, and then they may have a temper tantrum, some children may just be able to block it out and go on. Okay. So there's some broad types of temperaments that children are born with. And usually there's three we talk about: easy children, difficult children, and then those slow to warm up children. So, as a parent, it's really important that we determine what our children's temperaments are. Are they easygoing children? Okay, just go with the flow kind of kids. Are they difficult? Okay, and are they slower to warm up? And once we determine what that temperament is, it's best for parents to adjust their parenting behaviors to meet that child's temperament. Because if you have a difficult child and you're doing something a certain way, it isn't going to change because that is their temperament. Okay. And so basically you're kind of beating yourself, it's like beating your head up against the wall. But if we will sometimes just tweak what we do just a slight bit to match it with their temperament, then it makes life so much easier for everyone, not just the child, but for the parent as well. Okay. So here are the uniquenesses of each temperament. You'll see the characteristics of an easy child from a temperament, difficult, and then that easy to warm up. Okay. And usually that slow to warm up child, they're resistant and kind of hesitant at first, but once they kind of survey the environment and figure out kind of what's going on, they typically move more into that easy characteristics that you see here. So this is where we were talking about being aware and accepting of the temperament, follow their lead. And that's what we're talking about, adjusting your parenting. Follow the child's lead and adjust, be encouraging, patient with them, regardless of where that temperament level is, and then adjust your parenting so that it meets that. So we want to talk about attachment real quick. And what how nurturing promotes attachments. We know that parents can nurture their children by being sensitive and responsive to their needs. Nurturing primarily promotes that attachment to parents. Okay, so if the child's crying and we meet their need, if they're hungry and we feed them, if they're wet, we change their diaper, we're already from day one establishing that attachment and that nurturing, so that they know that this parent or this adult, this caregiver is here and they're going to take care of my needs. Parents can teach and influence children's growth and development by giving them sensory stimulation, doing direct teaching, encouraging them to try new things, modeling, or indirect teaching. And we know that parents are the child's first teacher. But there's lots of other outside social settings and activities that also have an influence on a child's development. Okay, so it's not just the parents; it's all these outside factors. So I want you to look at these outside factors that can influence in their social settings. Like we said, the family is the primary socializer. However, children are socialized and influenced through their peers, childcare in school, media, religious settings, like if they go to church, any kind of community setting that they may do, like if they interact in community sports, through their healthcare agencies. So three of the most important non-family socializers are school, peers, and the media, for sure. So let's talk about guidance and positive discipline for just a few minutes. Guidance is the act of directing and influencing a person toward a particular end. And we know that guidance can be direct or it can be indirect. Direct guidance includes directing and supervising children until they have self-control. Indirect guidance is modeling, influencing a child's behavior through an example, possibly the way you set up your classroom. That's kind of indirect, can be some indirect guidance. Now, positive discipline is the process of an intentionally teaching and training children to behave in an appropriate way. Okay. And positive discipline is always direct. Okay. It is training them and being very direct in what you want. Guidance and discipline, however, should not be confused with punishment. Punishment is a penalty for something a person has done wrong. And it's not necessarily the way that children learn positive behaviors. Okay. So don't confuse, oh, well, I'm going to punish them and that's going to teach them a positive behavior, because that is not the truth. Children learn behaviors by direct teaching, by imitation, by identification, trial and error, and reinforcement. And if we give positive reinforcement, that tells the child that that response is a good, like whatever it is that they're doing, we're giving them that positive reinforcement, so they're likely to do it again. Negative reinforcement will, of course, maybe make them not repeat that behavior. A timeout, removing an item from a child. Those are some negative types of reinforcement where we're letting them know that the type of behavior they're demonstrating is not a positive one, and that we don't want them to do it again. And so that's how we make that negative reinforcement. You can read through this about how children learn positive behaviors, and then about guiding as a parenting team. But one thing we know is that it's not always easy, and especially in the parenting world, when you're trying to make sure that parents. As children have different temperaments, so do parents. Not all parents come from the same cultural background. They don't all have the same beliefs. They weren't all parented the same. We weren't all parented the same. So those are some ways in which we may clash as parents, and how we have to try to figure out to be a united front so that we can guide children. And one of the things is that we know that there has to be discussion amongst parents in order to guide and discipline their children. We need to discuss our values before, what type of values do we want to instill in our children? What kind of goals do we have for rearing our children? How do we feel? Do we both share the same about overall views about guidance and discipline? Does one parent feel like spanking a child's the only way to make them, quit doing something? Or so we need to be able to know those things about it so that we can talk about them and all be on the same page, because there is nothing worse than when the parents are on two different pages. And as the children get older, and I don't mean like teenage older or adolescent or older, I mean like 4-year-old, 5-year-olds, they know how to play adults against one another. So, and they sense when parents are not on the same page. So we need to make sure long before we get to that stage, or even before we have children, that we're all on the same page as far as guiding our children and disciplining our children. So discussing our values and our goals of child rearing are extremely important in creating that united front. So you might want to go ahead and just, go ahead, read all about the rest of this, especially because this is some really good information about being positive role models and using positive words to children. Excuse me, and creating that team approach to parenting. But I'm quickly going through here because I want to get to the end, because I always love the quotes that they have at the end. And it said, where do we ever get the crazy idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse? Think of the last time you felt humiliated or treated unfairly. Did you feel like cooperating and doing better after that? And that's a quote by Jane Nelson. And that's probably, I love that one. That's why I was going quickly through there, because, nowhere do we ever get anywhere by humiliating and degrading people. That we a lot of times, we have to build people up, okay, and we have to show them the right way to go, and the children are especially that way, okay. So we want to praise those positives, redirect those negatives so that we can create children who are happy, nurtured, have self-worth. And usually when we see those things, then the children are easier to relate and conform to what's happening in the environment in which they're placed. So that's it for chapter 4. Don't forget to take a look through your Blackboard course at the supplemental materials, and there you'll find the chapter as well.